Bonnie and Clyde. You know the names, right? Of course you do. They're practically American folklore. We think of them as these star-crossed lovers on some kind of wild romantic adventure. But what if I told you that legend is mostly a fantasy? Today we're going to peel back all those layers and get to the grim and, frankly, brutal reality of who they really were.
But you know what? We're not going to start this story at the beginning. No, we're going to start at the very end. Picture this. It's May 23rd, 1934. We're on a desolate, lonely stretch of highway deep in Louisiana, and this is where the story and their lives comes to a screeching, violent halt. So a six-man posse, led by this absolutely relentless former Texas Ranger named Frank Hamer, is lying in wait. They've been studying the gang's every move, and they know they're coming. And as that Ford V8 gets closer, there's no warning, no pullover. They just open fire. It's a deafening storm of bullets from rifles, shotguns, pistols, everything they have.
Now, the coroner's report would later say Clyde had 17 bullet wounds and Bonnie had 26. But the car they were in, when all the smoke cleared, it was shot up with 112 bullet holes. 112. It was just this brutal final end. So that begs the question, right? How in the world did two criminals get so famous that their execution became a national event?
Well, to get that, you really have to understand the era. We're talking about the absolute worst days of the Great Depression. Banks are failing, people are losing everything, the whole system just feels broken. So Bonnie and Clyde? They weren't just seen as criminals. They became media superstars, and they were brilliant at crafting their own legend of rebellion and romance.
And you know what gave them their big break? A roll of film. Seriously. They left it behind by accident after a shootout in Joplin, Missouri. The police found it, developed the pictures, and sent them to the newspapers. And just like that, bam, suddenly all of America knew their faces. They weren't just some random fugitives anymore. They were celebrities, posing with guns, looking cool and defiant.
The historian Jeff Ginn really hit the nail on the head. He said, other outlaws had their thing. Dillinger had the looks, Pretty Boy Floyd had the great name. But these photos of Bonnie and Clyde suggested something else entirely. They were young, they were on the run, and they were obviously a couple. That hint of illicit romance was like a lightning bolt for a public that was just desperate to escape their own miserable lives.
But here's the thing. That glamorous image, it was pure fiction, a complete fabrication. To really understand their violent crime spree, we have to look at where they came from. And trust me, it was a world way more desperate than any photograph could ever show.
And their backgrounds were just worlds apart. On the one hand, you have Bonnie. She was a bright kid, an honor student who loved writing poetry and dreamed of being on stage. On the other hand, you have Clyde. He was born into just crushing poverty. His family was so poor that when they moved to a Dallas slum, they literally lived under their wagon for a while. His life of crime started young, with stuff like stealing turkeys.
But the person Clyde became was forged inside the infamous Eastham prison farm. This place was a house of horrors. He was repeatedly assaulted, which eventually led him to commit his first murder. He ambushed his tormentor and crushed his skull with a lead pipe. To get out of the brutal field work, he had another inmate chop off 2 of his toes. And the cruelest joke of all? 6 days later, he was paroled.
A fellow inmate, Ralph Fultz, probably summed it up best. He said, "I watched Clyde change from a schoolboy to a rattlesnake." And that's exactly what happened. The kid who went into that prison was gone forever. The man who walked out was bitter, full of rage, and wanted revenge on the whole system. He wasn't just a criminal anymore. He was a killer.
So that rattlesnake embarks on this 2-year crime spree with Bonnie right there beside him. But the life they were living? It was nothing like those playful photos. It was just a miserable, painful, and deeply paranoid way to exist. Look at this. This is the image they wanted the world to see. You've got Bonnie, hand on her hip, looking totally defiant, like she doesn't have a care in the world. This was the myth. This was the brand they were selling to a nation that was totally captivated by them. But the reality? Oh man, it was anything but glamorous. They were constantly on the move, sleeping in stolen cars, eating cold food from cans, bathing in ice-cold streams. That car became this pressure cooker of fear and fighting. And then, a horrible crash. Battery acid spilled all over Bonnie's leg, giving her third-degree burns. The injury was so bad that she couldn't really walk anymore. The muscle was just destroyed. One gang member later said you could literally see the bone in places. For the rest of her life, she either hopped or had to be carried by Clyde. This kind of brutal life, it just led to more brutal crimes. And while the public was fascinated at first, the gang's violence just kept escalating. And pretty soon, that fascination turned into total outrage, which kicked off one of the biggest manhunts in American history.
So what were the turning points? Well, first, Clyde gets his revenge on Eastham Prison by staging a breakout. But a guard is killed. That brings the full power of Texas law enforcement down on them. Then came what were called the Grapevine murders. On Easter Sunday of all days, they killed 2 young highway patrolmen. The press ran with this sensational story, probably fake, that Bonnie laughed as she shot one of them. True or not, it didn't matter. The public now wanted them dead, period.
And you started seeing things like this. It's a cartoon from the Dallas Journal. It's an electric chair, and on it there's a sign that says reserved for Clyde and Bonnie. The romantic folk heroes were officially gone. Now, they were just seen as cold-blooded monsters that needed to be put down.
So, in response, Texas hired a living legend, a man named Frank Hamer. This guy was an old-school, tough-as-nails Texas Ranger, maybe the greatest lawman of his time. He was quiet, he was methodical, and he always got his man. His mission was simple: hunt down and stop Bonnie and Clyde. And for 102 days, Hamer became their shadow, relentlessly tracking their every move.
And Hamer's relentless hunt brings us right back to where we started, doesn't it? That lonely road in Louisiana. The manhunt was over, but the bizarre, chaotic aftermath of their deaths, that's what would truly cement their legend and show just how strange the public's fascination with them really was. I mean, almost instantly, a massive crowd swarms the car. It was described as a circus-like atmosphere. People were fighting each other for souvenirs, shell casings, bloody pieces of Bonnie's dress. One guy even tried to cut off Clyde's ear and his trigger finger before the lawman stopped him. It was just a total frenzy.
So when it was all said and done, what was the final cost? Well, they murdered at least 9 law enforcement officers and at least 3 civilians. And the reward for the 6 men who finally stopped them? After all was said and done, they each got a check for $200.23. Just a shockingly small price to end a reign of terror that had gripped the entire country.
Bonnie and Clyde had always wished to be buried together, but Bonnie's mother absolutely refused. Still, their fame didn't die with them. Over 20,000 people showed up for Bonnie's funeral. The story of their deaths sold 500,000 newspapers in Dallas alone. And on Clyde's tombstone is the epitaph he wanted: gone but not forgotten. Turns out he was right about that.
Which really leaves us with one last big question. We've seen the awful reality, right? The poverty, the horrible violence, the constant pain they were in, and that brutal end. So why? Why does the romantic myth of Bonnie and Clyde still fascinate us so much, all these decades later? And maybe more importantly, what does our obsession with these 2 killers actually say about us?